Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today I just want to give a really quick rundown on the 4 new exotics that are currently available in Lightfall. This video is going to cover the exotic Stasis Bow, Verglass Curve, the exotic Heavy Stasis Glaive, Winterbite, the exotic Strand Sidearm, Final Warning, and the exotic Void Machine Gun, Deterministic Chaos. I'll probably have future videos regarding the remaining exotics this season as they become available, since we, we'll obviously have a raid exotic, and there's another quest exotic that appears to be coming out sometime later this season. But for now, I just want to go over these 4, because they're the ones we currently have. Starting with Verglass Curve, which is this season pass's exotic, and it's a stasis exotic bow. It behaves somewhat similarly to Trinity Ghoul, but the actual mechanics are a little different from how Trinity Ghoul works. For Verglass Curve, for each kill you get with the bow, you'll store an arrow for your Hailstorm perk's volley. For every arrow you store, your next hip-fired shot will fire a volley with that number of arrows that will freeze enemies and create stasis crystals if they hit terrain. You can get up to 5 arrows in a volley, and the actual function is pretty basic because, you just get kills and then hip fire to fire the volley. But there are a few interesting things that I do want to highlight about this bow. The number one thing is that this bow can currently cover both anti-overload and anti-unstoppable, because this season has overload bow on the artifact, and as of season 20, stasis shatter damage can stun unstoppable champions. Essentially, that makes Verglass Curve one of the best primaries for dealing with Scorn or Taken champions, because those will be both Overload and Unstoppable champions. And because of the way that each of these anti-champion capabilities activates, you do not need to worry about one of the champion stuns overriding the other one. The other thing that this bow is pretty good at is clearing out adds, especially with a stasis subclass focusing on crystal shatters. The crystals it creates also count towards kills versus your next volley as well, so once you get 3 or 4 arrows stacked, you can keep a large number of arrows stacked up consistently, although I will say the crystals counting for damage and kills towards the next volley appears a little inconsistent, but from time to time you'll pop 1 crystal, kill 4 or 5 enemies, and get a full volley charged up immediately. This weapon's catalyst also speeds up the draw time whenever you freeze an enemy, which is a nice bonus as well. I do think Verglass will be a lot better later in the season when higher level Nightfall is more easily available to players, and as a result they need something that can cover those type of champion mods, but I don't think it's bad. It's actually a pretty neat exotic bow. The other primary exotic we have so far is the Sidearm Final Warning. This is one of my personal favorites because it is basically the Destiny equivalent of Titanfall's Smart Pistol, and I do really love both Titanfall games, so it was really cool to see this added. Final Warning is a Strand Sidearm, and you'll get it from a quest started at the Puka Pond after you obtain all of the Strand fragments that are currently available. It also has 2 basic firing modes, where if you hip fire, your shots will track towards enemies, and while aiming, the shots will become virtually hit scan and get a pretty big increase to their crit damage. The other bonus is that you can hold the trigger down to charge a burst, and the burst fires increased stability, and hitting a full burst on a target will unravel them. The sidearm is actually pretty decent because of the increased crit damage and the easy access to unravel, but my main recommendation is going to be to use the sights and not the tracking mode, since the tracking mode will usually just hit body shots, and while that's not terrible, the amount of crit damage this thing does is actually really crazy if you're aiming down the sights. And with anti-barrier sidearm this season and some strand mods for dealing with tangles and unravels, this could be pretty decent going forward. I actually found that I liked it a lot more the more I played with it and tried putting some builds together with it. The next exotic on our list is Winterbite, which is a stasis exotic heavy glaive. You're going to get this one from the Hall of Heroes quest on Neomuna, but there's a couple things that I do want to note about it before I start talking about the perk specifically. The first is that I was actually going to do some damage tests in here for it, but while I was writing this, Bungie actually announced that Winterbite was able to deal much more damage than intended, and as a result has been disabled in all raids and dungeons. Once it's fixed, I may do a bit of testing with Winterbite, but for now, I'll just go over what it does. I don't know if it'll be fixed by raid day, so it's possible that you may not even get to use it there, but I still think it's pretty decent, especially because of how this glaive's projectiles behave compared to normal glaives. Normal glaives just fire a little energy ball that does some damage, but Winterbite fires a big stasis secret orb that shoots freezing bolts at enemies in a pretty large radius. This projectile also has the bonus of being able to very easily fully charge its shield, and it has a pretty good shield capacity compared to normal glaives. There's also the nice bonus of applying slow while using the melee as long as you have ammo, and as long as you have ammo you also get bonus melee damage. Winterbite also has the normal glaive perk tilting at windmills, which is nice but not super noticeable unless you use its shield a ton, which again, you could because glaives are awesome for defensive builds. And I do want to look at this one a bit closer in the future, probably after Bungie fixes the issue with the damage output, because I think there's some potential here, but there's also a conversation to be had about whether a glaive can really exist in the heavy slot when there's tons of other things there that do way more damage. I'll save all that for a future video. My only really big complaint with Winterbite at the moment is that the stasis orb can explode from impacting enemies, terrain, really anything, and that can damage or kill you if you're too close. In my opinion, it just seems super counterintuitive for a melee weapon to have an exploding attack that can kill you, because you're going to be really close when you shoot it. But I think for now, Winterbite has worked pretty well with the builds I mentioned in my Glaive video a few weeks ago. Whenever Winterbite gets its own video, I'll probably look at that as well. Now, the last exotic that I want to mention today is the exotic machine gun Deterministic Chaos. This one is obtained from the What Remains quest, which is available from Nimbus. It's also a void 360 RPM machine gun, and its main perks are that every 4th shot will weaken the target, and every 16th shot will also make the target volatile. The machine gun was pretty interesting to me originally because whenever the term Void Weaken is brought up, there's 2 different values that you may be seeing. Most things that apply a Void Weaken are a 15% debuff. However, there are a few things that are able to apply a 30% weaken, like Tether Hunter. After Divinity was nerfed in Season 19, Shadow Shot is the only long-range 30% weaken effect that we have currently, so I was originally curious as to whether or not Deterministic Chaos would be able to apply a 30% weaken at long range, which could give it some pretty big potential if that's the case. However, after testing it, it seems that the weaken from Deterministic Chaos is only the 15% version, which does make sense because it would probably be pretty overpowered if it was able to reliably apply 30% weaken, but that's also where my issue with Deterministic Chaos comes in. Nothing that it does is necessarily unique, especially with Volatile Flow being on this season's artifact. It's not a terrible machine gun under any respect, and the weaken is nice to have, but I almost wish that every 16th shot would actually buff the weaken to a 30% instead of doing the volatility, because it's a single activation of Volatile, and you can get better Volatile Rounds build rolling with Void Fragments or with Collective Obligation, even when Volatile Flow is not on the artifact. My other big problem with Deterministic Chaos is how the Heavy Metal and Vexadecimal perks both actually work. You have to continually be firing and hitting targets to stack both up. The weapon also has a pretty small magazine size for a machine gun, where you only get 48 shots, meaning you can get at most 3 activations of the volatility if you have perfect accuracy, and never stop shooting, which really doesn't present itself as worth it to me when Volatile Rounds is so easy to get if you run a Void subclass, and it's even easier to get this season with Volatile Flow. If I don't already have an exotic that I want to use, then maybe I'll think about using it, but I personally prefer my Crafted Commemoration if I'm looking for a Void machine gun. Although I do think as a whole, machine guns are in a pretty decent spot right now, but nothing about Deterministic Chaos specifically, other than the weaken, makes me that interested in it over other machine guns, and the weakening is available in most Void builds from other sources like your grenades or a Hunter Smoke Bomb or Warlock Void Soul. There's plenty of things about it that kinda work, but they don't really come together for me. However, that's all I have for today's video, so if you like what I do and want to see more, a like and subscribe are greatly appreciated. I hope to have at least another video or 2 out before the raid rolls out this week, but I'll be streaming the contest mode raid over on Twitch if that's something you want to see. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Later, everybody.